just want to shout out some people. And Melissa, if you see anybody in the chat you recognize or you want to call out for where they are, feel free. I won't be able to get to everybody, but it's good to see Paul Hankins here. Paul, you're everywhere. It's great to see you. I see Orange County, California represented here. Lots of Florida. Several California. There's some Michigan and New Hampshire coming in there. Great to see you all.
I saw someone, Jeremy, who's in Charlotte with me. I'm in Charlotte, so I was curious, Jeremy, where you teach. And Paul, good to see you again, Paul. Paul is everywhere, isn't he?
He is. I mean, he's great. He's great. I think he posted something on Facebook the other day, and I replied was just like, "I must paint you." He was outstanding. Yeah, so great. There's Queens represented. We're getting some people from the city. I saw Brooklyn earlier. That's great. Um, I saw Littleton, Colorado. I was in Littleton this summer, so that's great. All right, everybody.
There's a good mixture too of AP Lang and AP Lit, I
Yeah, I love
see.
it. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Great. And so I know a lot of you all are going to be taking this video to your colleagues. I want to reiterate something that Kristen just said. It is a holiday weekend. So please recognize what Kristen said. You will get this link. You will get an email with a brief survey and the video of this session next week. All right, you won't get it tomorrow, and so please don't worry about that over the holiday weekend. We will make sure that you get it next week, though. And on the screen here, I just wanted to give a shout out to some of the work that Melissa has done. We mentioned Teach Living Poets. She has this excellent book through NCTE that she's worked on, that she co-authored, as well as the Norton Guide to AP Literature that she co-authored with someone that a lot of us know and love, and that's Susan Barber. Shout out to Susan as well. But Melissa, you and I have done this a couple times. Melissa and I are fortunate enough to kind of go way back from when I was at College Board, and I was fortunate enough to get to know a lot of the people who were working in the spaces you were working in. Um, and Melissa, when when we were at APAC this past summer, she was presenting a lot of the information that you're going to see today at APAC. But we've decided that instead of making this like a linear walkthrough of a presentation, we're going to open it up to some discussion and things like that. So there's a lot more content on the slides here than we may get to, but don't worry about that. We just want to make sure that we had everything prepared as we needed it to be. Melissa, will you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this, why you all volunteered for the digital, and if we want to start with some of the questions that you had on your slides, we can do that. It's really up to you.
Yeah, sure. So I don't even remember the year, but it was like maybe 2018, if I would guess, that I was told in, I think it was around February or March, that, hey, guess what? We signed up for this digital pilot and your students are going to take the digital exam in May. So I didn't even know as a
Wait,
classroom
you
teacher.
you were told this?
By
Wasn't
my
your
AP
wasn't
coordinator.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought it was maybe your principal, because wasn't your principal your husband? I mean,
Was, yes,
okay,
yeah.
okay,
So
great.
but no, it wasn't his doing.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, that's interesting, because so the coordinator signed us up, and didn't know if we would be accepted or not, and then we didn't find out we got accepted until like early spring, and that's when he told me. And so I had to learn very quickly what that was going to look like in my classroom. So I feel like I can relate to a lot of teachers who are here who have been paper and pencil for a while, well, since ever really, have to make this kind of quick pivot in their classroom. And I've been there, and I feel like over the course of the years, I've really developed some strategies and some activities that we can get our students practicing all the things that we want them to practice digitally. And just it's the same thing, right? We're teaching the same skills. Good reading's good reading, good writing's good writing. Nothing really of my teaching instruction wise changed. It's just the format in which we're doing some things changed a little bit. And I still love paper and pencil. Like, oh my God, give me paper annotations all day long, right? With like fun highlighters and markers and colored pencils and all the colors. Like, I would wallpaper my house in student annotations if I could. They're just gorgeous to me. But we also have to provide opportunities for our students to do these same things digitally. And so I want to share with y'all tonight some ways that I do that in my classroom that I find to be successful.
And that's great. And yeah, that's the number one thing I've heard concern from teachers about is not once they get over the initial shock of thinking about doing it. And that's really the best way to put it. That's where the subtitle of this presentation comes from. You know, the kids are all right. Like the kids have been doing this. They've been doing these things digitally since kindergarten.
Yep.
They truly are. I guess that term digital native is kind of gone now because most people are anymore, I think. But uh, the trick really comes in our pedagogy and how do we take what we've been doing pedagogically and transfer it and help them learn to transfer it digitally. And so that's where a lot of the work that I've done during my summer workshops, a lot of the stuff that you've talked about has gone. And what I love about your session too is the way you share student testimonials. So it's
Yes.
telling us, hey, the kids are all right. The kids are into it. And so I'd love to get to some of that tonight too and talk a little bit about that. But initially, how did the kids respond when they found out they were going to be doing it digitally?
You know, they just kind of took it like, okay. We were fortunate and are fortunate to be a one-to-one school. So my students like are already used to working on laptops, devices. I think we had iPads at the time.
Right.
And what's so nice about the Blue Book app is that it really works on any device except for personal Chromebooks. But really any device that you're going to have at your school, it's compatible with. And so the students were just like, oh, okay, cool. And a lot of them were excited because they could type versus handwrite. And I
Yeah.
think that that's their number one, right? Most students type faster than they can handwrite. And it's just cleaner, right?
Yeah.
Like they can delete mistakes and not feel self-conscious about crossouts or arrows or all those things that you see on the paper exam.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Great. All right. So let's kind of jump into this. I know you've got some questions in here. So we'll just kind of work our way through um, here. And there's a great picture of you with your kids. Is that this year's graduating class?
Yeah, so sorry about
Fantastic.
all my selfies. I do that at graduation every
It's
year. I like
okay.
run around and take all the selfies.
I think people love it. I think people love seeing that. I'm glad you get to do that. So,
Oh, I miss those
um,
kids.
yeah, great. So, everyone, most of you found the chat, but let's go ahead and drop this in the chat, if you would. So, what are you worried about with the change to digital exams? Everybody, let's put that in the chat. Don't hit enter yet. Let's do it as a chat blast. So type it, and I'm going to give everybody about 30 seconds to type it, some thinking time, some typing time, and then I'll say go, and we'll all hit enter at the same time and watch Zoom just explode. So this is 30 seconds of quiet, awkward thinking time. All right. And five, four, three, two, one. Everybody hit enter if you haven't already. And you know, kind of look back at what your colleagues have said. And Melissa, feel free, look back in there and anything you want to comment on or you want to grab and go with, it's all on you.
Oh my gosh.
I know there's a lot of thinking going on here.
That's bomb drop. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I see a lot of digital annotating, so we'll definitely talk about that.
Yep.
Someone mentioned cheating.
Hmm.
Not going to happen on the Blue Book app, which is nice. And now AP Classroom, did y'all know that there's a lockdown option, which is amazing, total game changer. I
Yep.
didn't use AP Classroom much last year because they were just cheating all the time. But now with that lockdown option, you just go to the advanced menu and you can like click on it.
Hmm.
Makes all the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, that's huge. And when I was sharing that with teachers and how that was coming this fall, this summer, they were like, that can't happen fast enough. We've needed that for a while, and I get it. And that's something that Michelle says here in this next to last comment, 714. She says cheating while practicing. When I work with students, when some of the teachers I'm coaching, and I work with pre-service teachers and student teachers as well as coaching teachers, um, we have these frank conversations with kids. But that also means we have to have some conversations about what our grading looks like, and how we're going to let kids revise things and how we start to develop a culture of improvement, not just a culture of assessment. Because kids usually cheat not because they're jerks. There are jerks who cheat. I get it, but they cheat because they're desperate. or they're running out of time or whatever. And so it becomes a bigger conversation about the system. But Michelle, I'm totally right there with you. You know, if they cheat while they practice, the problem is not just the cheating, it's I don't know what I need to do for them. Melissa, did you have kids who were, doing anything or trying anything like this, or did you have to change up the way you were grading things?
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, now that AI is a thing,
Yeah.
that's a whole separate webinar, right? Um, and they were cheating on the AP classroom progress checks. They would just look stuff up. But that's kind of been resolved now with the lockdown browser. So woohoo. Really, those were my two biggest ones that I would notice.
Okay. Great. Let's see here. Anything else jumping out to you real fast?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
actually. So Chelsea mentions screen fatigue and
Yeah.
navigating text. And I would argue the opposite against screen fatigue. I actually had a student provide feedback that the light of the screen kept her attention better than paper does. And that made her focus more. And I was like, that's interesting. And then what was the other thing she said? Navigating the text.
Navigating
Oh
the
yeah.
text. Yeah.
So there are some really amazing features in the Blue Book app, which we'll look at tonight, that is so helpful when it comes to navigating the passages that they're going to be reading on the exam.
Hmm. Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump in the deck to those slides because you've got some really good slides, I think, relating to that. Um, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so you want to start with the multiple choice, or you want to talk about essays?
Let's do multiple choice. It's the one that has like all the numbers on it. Slide 16.
Slide 16. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
And I will start talking, and if you could like click through the numbers as I
Sure.
say them. So
Absolutely.
in the Blue Book app, and this is the same app that y'all, your students take the PSAT, the SAT, other standardized tests on already. So they're going to be familiar with a lot of these tools. And you can also have them download the app and practice the app ahead of time, right? To like get used to the tools and the annotations and the highlights and all the things. So when your students are taking their exam on the Blue Book app, they're going to see the passage that they have to read on the left-hand side, and then one question at a time for multiple choice on the right-hand side. And now, yay, A through D options for multiple choice. So exciting. The question stems, you can flip through and read all the question stems before you go ahead and answer the questions. I mean, that's like test taking strategy 101, right? Like read the question stems first, then go back and read the passage or the poem or whatever it is there. This gives you some context for what that text is going to be about. So they can go back and forth, right? They can go back. That was a problem that first year. Students could not go back, but that
Yeah, that
has
was it.
long been since resolved, and it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah.
So next, there is a timer up at the top of the screen. You can see it in red up here. It counts down from the total amount of time for multiple choice 1 hour, and it counts them down. They can choose to hide the timer if it makes them anxious, but it will pop up when there's 5 minutes remaining as a warning for the student. So I did see some people in the chat mentioning timing, right? So they can leave the timer up there and have that constant reminder of how much time they have. But regardless if they hide it or not, it's going to pop back up and be red when there's 5 minutes to go to give them that warning. So that also alleviates the proctor and testing coordinators and administrators and all those things from like a lot of the paperwork and just huss and fuss about administering the test. There's no more announcements like you should be moving on to blah, 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 because the timer is going to do that for them.
Okay.
Number 4, this is amazing. Okay. So when the question is asking about a specific line or phrase or sentence or
Yeah.
paragraph or whatever, it's going to be highlighted in the text. Like you can see there, it's like highlighted in blue and underlined. So the student doesn't have to count lines, and they don't have to like, with their little eyeballs, find the phrase that the question is asking about. It's gonna be highlighted automatically for them. And my
This is the
students,
biggest game changer with the multiple choice. You were going to say about
huge,
your students. How'd your students love it?
loved it so much. And that was one of the most common feedbacks, is that saved them so much time from
Yeah.
just having to search. And they're like nervous. They're under time pressure. They're feeling anxious already. And then they got to go find this phrase. And they're like, I can't find it. And they're freaking out. No, it's just highlighted right there for them. So easy.
Yeah.
And
And
that's,
the other thing I've been reminding everybody with that too, and I think everybody, I've had conversations with some people who are in this session with this during the summer, but reminding students to still like they may need to read the whole sentence, they may need to read the line before, a line after, not just read the part that's underlined, and that I'm going to reiterate that to them. Sorry, I traveled today. I guess I can't speak. Reiterate that to them even more about how important it is that if that line 22 is underlined, you still have to read the whole sentence or read the before and after, just depending on how long it is, because they're going